13 is a brand founded for the creators, the innovators, and the motivators, for the people who get up every single day and strive to be better and leave a positive mark on this world. 13 is a fantastic clothing company, and the people that are behind it are passionate, creative, and some of the nicest people I have ever met. All of their stuff looks great, it's comfy, all the designs are so super cool. 13 has some of my favorite t-shirts and seriously my favorite pair of sweatpants I have ever worn. 13 has been a longtime sponsor and supporter of the Cory cast, and they wanted to extend their love to you, the listener. So when you check out their website at thur13en.com, fill your cart with some cool hats, hoodies, sweatpants. Just make sure you use the code word CoryCast at checkout and you're going to save yourself a little bit of money. thur13en.com. Make sure you tell them Cory sent you. My guest today is Allyson Kuhn, the 988 manager, which is the local suicide hotline. If you or someone else you know are struggling with thoughts of depression or suicide, please dial 988 and they will connect you with counseling and services that are available to you here in Syracuse. Allyson and her team have quite the job here in Syracuse. It is not a job I would want, so I'm glad that there's other sweet, kind-hearted people like Allyson who are there to offer support and guidance to those who need it the most. I felt this episode was very fitting, especially just 2 episodes ago. Scott Dixon talked about his struggles with suicide, and I felt the timing was going to be just right for this episode. Now, I did have slight technical difficulties. At first, we couldn't record it online, and the technology did not want to work. So, unfortunately, it's only audio, but hey, at least we still have that. Because Allyson's message is powerful, I want to make sure it gets out there in the universe. She is there to offer support and guidance. Again, dial 988 if you or a loved one is struggling with thoughts of suicide. There are tons of resources here in Syracuse that are free that she can connect you to. So without further ado, here's my friend, Allyson.
Allyson Kuhn. I'm from the Syracuse, New York area. I've been a contact for about 4 years, and I'm the 988 manager.
So 988, the suicide lifeline,
yes,
right?
The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline.
How many people are on your team?
So we do have a large team. So at contact, it's not just 988. The line that we answer 211, Crisis Connect, local community lines such as like after hours, and other support lines, warm talk lines. So our whole team, we're hiring every day, so I'm not 100% of a definitive answer, but I would say for 988 we have probably about 10 dedicated specialists that we call them.
And they're people that work around the clock, right?
Yep. So we're a 24/7 call center,
Wow.
Answering 988 24/7 for a variety of different counties.
So not just Onondaga.
Not just Onondaga. Nope.
So you also answered the 211 hotline?
Yes.
Okay, so Katie Lemery?
Yes.
You know Katie?
Katie White, yes.
Yeah, Kate, she's awesome, love her. She said that they cover multiple counties, right? And it's always shifting counties too, right?
So,
if I remember correctly.
Yes and no. At different times of the year, we may get in touch with a county who is requesting that we answer for their county or we take over their county. As of recent, we just got a backup center who is going to assist us in answering the different 988 calls, which is Tompkins County. So it kind of shifts depending on the need, depending on how many calls we're getting, how many we're answering, staffing, a lot of things go into consideration.
So these people are answering the phone and they never know what's going to be on the other line. Does it tell them before they pick up, like, this is 211, this is 988? So they can like mentally prep before they pick up the phone?
Yeah, so the way our call I guess, routing system works is that some individuals answer, again, strictly 211. Some strictly answer, 988. If they're a 988 specialist, that's like their primary line. And when the calls are rolling in, it says it on our screen. It'll come up in our system and it'll say this is a 988 call, this is a 211 call for Onondaga County. It gives you a little bit of a background so you know what to anticipate.
Because I am trying to imagine myself picking up that phone, and I would want to know, am I going to help somebody find where garbage pickup is? Or am I going to help somebody try to save their life?
Right.
Right? What kind of training involves to be on the team? Because I feel like you would need a lot of training to handle a call like that.
Yeah, so our training, again, really depends on the person, depends on what they're coming to us already with. We've had a lot of 988 specialists who have maybe been in the mental health field, where maybe they don't need all of the training for active listening skills. So that's being empathetic, open-ended questions, things of that nature. For somebody who's coming to us pretty fresh, who has no prior knowledge, hasn't ever been in the mental health field, they may require a bit more intensive training.
Right.
So that may look like a lot of observation shifts. So they might observe those of us who have been there for, an extended period of time, who have knowledge of the line and the different skills. Apprenticing shifts, so that's where we take the opportunity to really see what they're working with and see their skills and what they have learned in their training. There's a lot of coursework, if you will, so a lot of different kind of internal trainings that we go through with them as well. It's kind of an integrative kind of process.
When you came into community, what was your background in?
Yeah, so when I started at Contact, I was actually in my undergrad at Utica College, and then Medaille College in Buffalo was my graduate program. So when I started at Contact, I was still a student. This was really kind of my first, I was dipping my toes in the mental health field when I started at Contact. But throughout, I am now a mental health counselor working with a limited permit, so I'm ingrained in the counseling field as well. So that's where I started and kind of where I am now.
What led you to, not to sidetrack from the hotline, but what led you into mental health?
Yeah. So I have my own, personal struggles with anxiety, and I think that I have really been able to kind of turn my experiences into a learning experience or, a way of supporting others who might be going through similar situations.
Wow. So you just you got into it from a perspective of just wanting to help other people who are struggling?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Props to you, because I feel like that would be a really hard job to do, mentally for yourself every day. How do you let go of work when you go home? That's gotta be tough.
It can be really tough. I think the longer you're in the field, you learn kind of how to appropriately separate yourself from the work.
Yeah.
So after a long day, typically I do something that has nothing to do with a crisis situation or a stressful, situation.
I'm building Legos.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. I need something chill after a day like that.
Exactly. My go-to is knitting.
Yeah, okay. I love that.
My friends are always like, you're such an old lady, but no, I love to knit.
There's no rush.
No, exactly.
Right? Yeah.
My significant other and I were playing with our puppy all the time, and
nice.
Anything low-key. Anything
that doesn't have, I feel like, especially, constantly feel like you're under a time crunch, right?
Exactly.
Because that's got to be, and it's the same people the ambulance 911 operators. I give them so much credit, because that's a tough job. To not bring home every day with you. That's got to be really hard. Yeah. To hear something that's kind of traumatizing on the other end of the phone.
It can be, and the good thing about Contact and the individuals I work with is that there's always opportunities to debrief. So very rarely does anybody, and I'm speaking for myself, I guess, that we try to really make it a point to debrief with individuals after those really heavy phone calls, because it is easy to take that home and kind of sit in that and think about it, all day, all night. So we try to talk through it, process it, talk about the strengths of the call, talk about maybe what somebody could have done better if they feel like it was lacking. So really talking through things, I think, has, been helpful for me and other people.
Yeah, especially be able to let go. I mean,
Yeah.
How many 988 calls do you guys get in a day?
So it really
varies.
It depends. Like yesterday, we had over 80, and then the day before we may have had
What's a benchmark?
40.
Let's you're saying 80, and I couldn't tell. Is that a lot or not enough?
So our answer rate again varies on a lot of different things. So if we have a backup center, if we are covering more areas within these different counties, so it depends. Right now, 80 is quite a bit for where we're at.
Yeah, that's a lot.
But it could be anywhere from 40 to 80. It depends on the day.
No, when you call the 988 number and you have suicidal thoughts, what can you expect from the other person on the phone?
So if an individual were to call us and they were experiencing thoughts of suicide, we are in a place to provide emotional support. So typically what the call will look like is we want to understand from the caller's perspective what exactly is going on, really utilizing those active listening skills, trying to best understand what the presenting concern is. Once we get a little bit of an idea of what's going on, that's where the risk assessment piece comes into play. So we do a suicide screening, right? So
I've never heard of that before.
So is the person having thoughts of suicide at the time of the call? Have they had thoughts of suicide maybe within the last 24 hours? Have they had thoughts of suicide in the last 2 months? And then have they ever had a suicide attempt? So we go through that pretty much with every single caller. Obviously, if a caller shares that outright with us, we might not go in depth with those questions right off the bat, but we do screen and assess every single call.
So once you assess them and screen them, you're there to provide emotional support.
Yes.
And then is there like another piece where you connect them with a counselor, a local counselor or something?
Yeah. So our line, we are really the ones providing support. We are able to connect individuals with referrals, for instance. That's a little bit easier for callers who are within those immediate counties that maybe like 211 services, because we have a database and we pull from that database. However, for callers who might be out of the county or even out of the state, it can get a bit challenging to connect them with certain services. We can, it's just not as readily available to us at our call center. Yeah. So with that being said, we don't connect them necessarily with a counselor, but we can provide them with that immediate, in the same moment support. But we can also connect them with like a peer support line. So if they just want to talk for a little bit longer, if they're feeling as though maybe they didn't get enough time with us and we're moving towards wrapping up our phone call, we can do a warm transfer to a peer support line, for instance, through like Liberty Resources. There's also mobile crisis services. So mobile crisis is comprised of counselors who are mobile, so to speak, and they can go to callers' locations if they're available and if the caller consents.
Is that in Onondaga County?
So that is Onondaga County, and then we can also provide services to, for instance, like Oswego County, Cortland, I want to say Madison County, and a couple of other surrounding counties.
Wow. Sounds like a lot of counties, a lot of area to cover, huh? Holy cow. How many people are on that team? Do you know? Mobile crisis,
I think it really depends. I know there's one county that we connect with for a backup center that we provide support to for 988, and I know it's comprised of like 1 or 2 individuals. It's a really small team.
Wow, holy cow.
Here, I think we have, I want to say there's usually always 2 people on the mobile unit who respond.
Yeah. Wow, that's really, this podcast is just very timely. I was telling you before that, so when this episode drops, 2 episodes prior with Scott Dixon, he went into when he attempted suicide in the hospital. And it was a heavy podcast, so this is just very timely to anybody who might be struggling with those thoughts. Is people who struggle with thoughts of suicide, is there often like past traumas in their life, or can that vary between people?
That's a really good question. I think it depends on really the person, the situation. I mean, trauma definitely plays a role in thoughts of suicide. I mean, it goes down to biological makeup, right? Trauma impacts a lot biologically and chemically in our bodies and our brains. Some individuals possess more resiliency than others. So what that means is some people are able to cope with crisis situations maybe a little bit more healthily or readily than the next person might. So there's a lot that goes into that in terms of how people respond and cope and recover from a trauma situation.
Wow, it's when you hear Scott and how he talks about his story, it's very moving because he was at kind of like a breaking point, like mentally and physically for him too, because he was in the hospital bed. So I can only imagine like being in that. That's really tough. For people who have had suicidal thoughts, you like talk timeline, like was it today, a week ago, 2 months ago? Is it ever too late to get help? Like, is a year prior to, or a year past too late to talk to somebody?
Absolutely not. No, I think that if you're experiencing thoughts of suicide and it's new to you, it's a new experience or something you've never experienced before, I always emphasize reaching out, as soon as possible, depending on comfort level, just because, I think that while you can cope with your mental health independently, I think it does make a difference to really get that support from someone else, because maybe that other person, for instance, the 988 specialist that they're talking to, maybe they're aware of resources that the caller might not be. So just having that additional support, I think, is a really good, what we call a protective factor. It'll make it so they're coping sooner, right? So maybe they don't get as far as making a suicide attempt.
Right. And the coping process, that journey is different for each person. Is there like each person falls into 4 categories where they need a visual stimulant or a physical, like how does that break down?
Yeah, I think coping, again, it's really different for everybody. There's callers who share with us that their coping mechanism is maybe seeking support from another family member, where another caller might not find that comforting or supportive because family distress is the one thing that actually, maybe triggered their crisis.
Triggers it, yeah, right.
Yeah, so I think it really depends. It depends on what that person finds comforting.
Are there common triggers that you find?
So on 988, something that we always kind of assess, or something that we have in our call log, is presenting concern. So when we're talking with a caller, we try to kind of gauge what exactly is the presenting concern here. Something that we find on the line, and just something that I've seen by doing, the data for 988, is that the primary presenting concerns are in fact suicide, relationship and other family-related concerns. I know that's pretty broad, but it can vary. Right. And then financial and basic need-related concerns. There's a lot of things that get brought up on the line.
What kind of data do you track? Like, are you looking at like ages and areas of where these people are calling from?
Yeah, there's a lot of different data. So we submit this data to the Office of Mental Health, who pretty much like oversees what is happening with 988 in the different counties and regions. So basically, I report on demographic information. I report on what referrals we're offering people. I report on suicidal ideation as well as homicidal ideation. If there are rescue situations, so if that's where emergency services are dispatched, I keep track of that. So a lot goes into reporting.
And was the Center for Mental Health, is that what it was called?
Office of Mental Health.
The Office of Mental Health, and that is a national organization?
Yeah, so that's for New York State. We connect with the Office of Mental Health for New York State.
Okay, for New York State.
Yes.
And then their job is to look at that data and like how do we like decrease this? Because it seems like, is it an exponential problem? Is like suicide a growing problem? Are we lowering that number? Like,
I would like to believe with all of the mental health services we have in place at this time, I think that it's definitely more accessible for individuals who are having or experiencing thoughts of suicide. I think risk is definitely being lowered. When individuals call 988, that is really the goal. Our goal is to use the least invasive intervention. So that means we're trying to de-escalate callers to the point where hospitalization is not needed. We're trying to de-escalate so rescue, emergency services don't need to respond to the situation. That's our goal. We're trying to safety plan. So I do think by empowering individuals and creating a plan like this with them, we are reducing suicide risks.
And especially this day and age where there's so, you said access. I mean, holy cow, we get off this, I could literally set up an appointment with somebody and be on Google Meet in 5 minutes with them, which is crazy. You said take the steps to de-escalate somebody. What are the steps you follow to de-escalate? Is it like first connect on a mutual level about a shared story and then go to act? Is it that rigid in steps?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily rigid. I mean, there's a process that we go through on the line just to make sure that we're providing the appropriate, again, in the moment support that the caller needs. Obviously making sure that they're safe, making sure we're screening for suicide. Really the process is just making sure that they're safe and can remain safe after the phone call. As far as de-escalation, there's a lot of different ways that you can work on de-escalating an individual. I think that really meeting them where they're at is something I always emphasize, which is, again, connecting with them. What is going on for them in that moment where they feel like they can't stay safe? What do they need to stay safe? Really letting them lead the way and allowing them to feel empowered to change their circumstances.
This conversation is like a dance almost.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, I imagine it's like a fencing match.
It can be.
Is this like just something that you've practiced, or have you had a good mentor that you learned from when you started?
Yeah, I think that a combination of both. You kind of fall into your own rhythm in terms of how to connect with callers, how to best support a caller. I know I've been through a multitude of different trainings in terms of mental health and suicide specific topics. For instance, there's the applied suicide intervention training that I've been through. So I'm trained as an assist trainer. And basically what that means is I can provide support to other trainees as well as individuals experiencing thoughts of suicide. So in combination with that, yes, there's a ton of mentors, a ton of management that really kind of guided me through this process.
So really like a lot of outside information to kind of help you. It seems like a delicate conversation to have, because you're talking to somebody who's like really tiptoeing the edge. If you are at any point concerned that they might step off that ledge during the conversation, is there a point where you call emergency service so the EMT can get there beforehand? How does that look?
Yeah, so although it is a delicate conversation, I kind of want to just add in here that the best thing that you can do if you ever think that somebody is struggling with thoughts of suicide or, considering ending their life, always ask. By asking about suicide, you're not going to put somebody into like a suicidal crisis. You're not putting thoughts in their head that weren't already there. Right. So I always emphasize asking. If you have any inclination that the person is not doing well, simply be direct and say, hey, are you having thoughts of suicide? So there's my little tangent.
I like that,
but in addition to that, when it comes to having that conversation with them, I think it's really just about making sure that, I'm going to pause.
Yeah.
Can you ask your question again?
Yeah. It was just, see, now I forgot to.
It was a good question.
How, when you call the EMT, at what point do you get somebody involved in the process?
Yeah. So again, typically we try to use the least invasive intervention. So what that means is if we can connect them with mobile crisis, if we can connect them with a peer support line depending on risk level, if we can safety plan with them, Even if they can only stay safe for a half an hour and then we give them a follow-up call, we can dial back out and we can check in with them, say half an hour, 45 minutes, the next day even. We're really just trying to make sure that they can stay safe. Now, if a caller is totally resistant to safety planning, which happens at times, some individuals feel as though there is no hope, they're not optimistic about kind of their outlook on life at that point. They can't identify coping skills, feel like they don't have the support. It's just all of those things kind of piling up, and they're resistant to safety planning. If we get the inclination that they're not going to be able to stay safe, if they have a plan in place with a time frame, means available to take action on their life, that's when we may get, emergency services involved if they cannot essentially kind of like contract their safety.
Yeah. Are there red flags in the conversation that you're looking for when determining that?
There can be. So red flags to us might be, again, they have thoughts of suicide, they have a plan in place to take their life, they have means accessible where they could, go forward with that plan, they have a time frame in place, they have intent to act on their life, maybe they've already acted on their life. There are red flags like that where if all those things are in place, that means that they've really taken those steps to consider what this might look like.
You started 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. So just before 2020. Mm-hmm. How was COVID?
Yeah, so COVID was definitely...
That's a very broad question, but I'm only imagining the surplus of more traffic.
Yeah, during COVID, I think all of our lines, especially 988, were being heavily utilized. And I think a big factor of that was that isolation piece.
Right.
I remember for the longest time when COVID had started, we had a little button in our call log that said coronavirus. And if somebody called and that was their topic of conversation, we would click it. And we were actually tracking that for a little bit of time. At that time, I obviously was not the 988 manager, so off the top of my head, I don't know what those numbers look like.
Oh, yeah, right.
But, yeah, it was definitely the isolation piece. People feeling as though they didn't have support during that time. So we did see a lot of that on the line.
Yeah, I could imagine. COVID was tough for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And then the suicide hotline, I thought suicides upticked during COVID only because everybody felt so isolated. Mm-hmm. Those thoughts of isolation make things a little bit worse, huh? Mm-hmm. And I think the video just ended. Let me click it again. So those thoughts, especially when you're isolated, are very tough. I find it comforting being around friends way more, or being around my significant other or my kid, and it's easier said than done because I haven't never had to deal with thoughts of suicide. Mm-hmm. I've never had anybody in my life who have taken their life, so I can only imagine. I just can tell you I'm not a fan of, I feel like it's a new age where it's it's more accessible, but also people use it as a butt end of a joke sometimes, and I'm like, you don't know who you're talking to that has a suicide's affected in their lives. It could be a lot of people you don't know, and that's not something that a lot of people would share either. Right. What is the toughest part about your job?
Yeah, I think the most difficult part, and I'm sure a lot of people in the mental health field can agree, is that I have this desire to help everyone. I would call that a very fixer mentality. As a counselor, I use that a lot in my language with even my clients, with callers. Having a fixer mentality can be challenging because I think the only person at times that can really make an impact or change their situation is the person that's experiencing the mental health concern. So having sometimes that unrealistic expectation that I carry with me that, everybody I speak to today, I'm going to change their situation. I'm going to change the fact that they're going through what they're going through. That can sometimes be really difficult.
Yeah, that's one thing, that's tough to let go of. And you're doing it from a removed perspective, but I struggle with that with people that I care about, where I'm like, I wish you'd be doing X, but you want to do Y, but you have to just kind of let it go that not everybody's going to want to do the thing that you want, you know?
Yeah.
And that can be tough, especially indirect people. You are trying to save these people's lives and they might not take your advice. And you've done everything that you could, right?
Yes.
So that's the hardest part. What's the best part about your job?
The best part is definitely those moments where the individual at the end of the call feels like that hope and that optimism just by simply exploring what resources maybe they already had, but maybe they just weren't, thinking of, or maybe they didn't have the awareness that that would be helpful in their situation. So I really think just leading a caller, supporting a caller to get to a place of, you know what, no, like I can stay alive. This does get better. There is hope.
Mm-hmm. Now, if there's one thing that you wish, if you had a magic wand, you could wave it. One thing you could change about the mental health field, people in general, what would it be?
Oh my goodness. I really just think, we've definitely moved into an age or a day where people are very accepting. People are very understanding and they want to learn and they want to be able to support those who maybe they're connected with or just be able to support different organizations.
I think 2020 changed that.
Because
everybody was looking for help during that time.
Yeah.
Everybody seemed to be a little bit more kinder, even though, we can go back and forth on red versus blue, but overall, I felt like people got a little more compassionate coming out of this, where there is no more judgment if a dude is going to talk to a counselor for help or something,
Yeah.
That stigma is gone. What do you think contributes to that? Do you think it's COVID?
I think it's just the fact that mental health is being talked about. I think the fact that, whether it be celebrities, whether it be just social media influencers, whatever the case may be, I think it's just being normalized. Right. And I do think that COVID played a role in that because I think everybody collectively was kind of struggling in one way or another. And I think everybody, again, was normalizing the fact that they were connecting on that same level.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I give you so much credit for the job that you do. It's very tough. I can only imagine answering the call constantly. Do you ever do seminars on mental health?
So I don't necessarily do seminars.
I feel like you're a great public speaker. I feel like you'd be great at it.
Thank you. I have done different talks related to the 988 line. I know a couple of public figures in the last year have died by suicide, and I've had conversations surrounding that on different platforms. So I have been in this realm in the past.
Mm-hmm. And your goal and objective on those different platforms is just to educate about 998? Or 988.
988, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's my role, is really to educate and to, again, talk about it so we can normalize the fact that mental health is a thing. It's here, it's not going away, and it's better to try to understand it so we can better help ourselves and other people.
What do you think is one thing people don't understand about mental health?
Really good question. I sometimes have a hard time answering that because I myself, I've always been very understanding that just because I don't experience the same concern doesn't mean that another person shouldn't be validated for theirs. I think that sometimes there's this idea that if something isn't paid attention to or focus isn't placed on it, that it's not there.
Right.
So I think sometimes it's avoidance.
Right. Avoidance, you think?
Yeah.
Just avoiding mental health completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially for dudes, there's a stigma against guys ever needing mental health, which is just wild to me. It's sad.
Well, and ironically, believe it or not, on 988, just by the data I've collected, more males in previous months, the last couple of months it's been different, but more males typically do call 988.
Really? Mm-hmm. Interesting. When you look at it from a national level, does it normally sway more men commit suicide than females?
So I think that it's hard to say because when we think about individuals who have died by suicide, it's kind of the same type of situation where, we do have data, but we don't have all the data. So I think month to month, it probably varies. Mm-hmm. Off the top of my head, again, I know in previous months, it was more so female.
Oh, wow.
I don't want to say dominant in terms of who called, but right. I know in the recent months, I've noticed an uptick in males.
Yeah. I wonder what it is. for just a recent uptick. I do like the fact that the stigma's gone. I do like the fact that somebody can go get help and not feel like a lesser of a man or a lesser of a woman that they do that.
Right.
Are there preferred resources that are like go to in your back pocket?
Yeah, I mean, 211 is definitely a go-to. I always emphasize that, especially on the 988 line. Because
now, for those that don't know, maybe missed my podcast with Katie, what is 211?
So 211 is an information and referral service. It's free. Individuals can reach out just by dialing 211, and they can get connected with a variety of different resources. Really depends on what they're looking for, but for instance, there are referrals on there or resources for local counselors and therapists, different organizations that might be able to support someone with mental health concerns, a variety of different things you can find on there.
Okay, perfect. Now continue. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to derail you.
No, that's okay.
The resources.
Yes. So resources I keep in my back pocket. 211 for sure. I think that Psychology Today, also a really great resource. That's where you can go and you can type in any information, including where you're located, what mental health concern you're experiencing, insurance information, and you can get connected with a counselor or a therapist that way as well.
A lot of people have the wall to get over of their financial situation to see any of these counselors. Is there any kind of support in terms of people who maybe aren't financially available to pay for these kind of counseling?
Yep. So another line actually that I did not mention through Contact is Crisis Connect. So Crisis Connect, that can be viewed as a triage line in a sense. So if somebody calls Crisis Connect, they can get connected with a mobile crisis outreach team. They can talk to a counselor who's on the line through Contact. A lot of support there as well, because mobile crisis is not a service that charges any type of fee for connecting with individuals.
So there's no fee?
No.
Okay, gotcha. Do you also do that hotline too, or are they two separate?
Yeah, so Contact, again, answers Crisis Connect, so that's an internal line that is through our agency as well.
But that's not under you, right? You do the 988?
Yes.
Oh, it is?
No, well, I answer pretty much all of the lines at Contact.
Okay, gotcha.
But no, Crisis Connect is separate from 988.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So totally, okay,
yes.
Gotcha. And there's also school services listed on your website? Too?
Yeah.
What is that about?
So, being transparent, I'm in the crisis services division, and then we have a school services side of the agency.
Okay. So I'll get that person on the podcast one time to talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then offer training and education also on your website, like directly through the website?
Yeah.
Anything that you want people to know about contacting new services?
Well, Contact is a wonderful agency. I think that provides so much support and community outreach. Again, all of the lines that we answer for are free, confidential services. So whether it be Crisis Connect, 988, whether it be the Contact hotline, really any line that is associated with our agency is free, confidential, and we provide that emotional support.
Okay, well, and free is the big one.
Yes.
Free is the big one. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's great. I'm so happy that there's like a service here in Syracuse that's here for people, because I couldn't imagine if it wasn't.
Right.
It's such a barrier for a lot of people, and a lot of people struggle with those thoughts. Allyson, we whipped through a lot of my questions today. Do you have anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I think we covered a lot.
We're not getting any video to this, so it's okay. We're just going to be audio, but hey, it's all right. We tried something new. Thank you for joining me. This has been really enlightening. So if someone is experiencing suicidal thoughts, call 988, the suicide crisis line, and someone will be able there to connect you to resources. And if you're struggling, don't be embarrassed. Call and talk, right?
Yes, it's free, confidential, and it's a 24/7 number that's available for anybody who needs emotional support.
Thank you. You're wonderful, Allyson. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Cory Cast. I really appreciate the time that you spent listening and even listening to the full episode to get you to this point. I just want to say I'm just so appreciative and so thankful that I have so much love and support for these episodes. If you want to be a guest on this podcast, reach out to me. I'm always looking for new people. Let's talk about what you're passionate about. Let's talk about your hobbies. Let's give you a positive platform to talk about the things that matter to you. Do me a favor, make sure you hit subscribe, like, follow, leave a review of the podcast. All those little things will help this podcast grow. Because without you guys, there is no podcast. And I am just so grateful that you're taking the time to listen to it today. Thank you so much.